The OK Corral Gunfight, Heroes and Villains. Cowboy Billy Clanton was still dying, as the press began to piece together details of the October 1881 street fight in Tombstone, located in Arizona Territory. Later known as the gunfight at the OK Corral. Richard Rule, a veteran Tombstone Nugget City editor, helped to carry Clanton to the place where he would go into history. Then, Richard returned to the streets to continue his work. Rule started collecting details about the gunfight and interviewing witnesses to help him get a better understanding of what happened during that crucial half-minute and the events leading up to it. It was a great example of frontier journalism, and crucial to understanding the event that is most discussed on the American frontier. The story of the OK Corral has been told many times and from many perspectives. Sometimes with fiction intrusions and biased analysis. With the help of Richard Rule, we now have a more complete understanding of the events leading to the gunfight, as well as what happened in Tombstone. The tension of 1881's summer was intense and emotions grew explosive. Bands of rustlers roamed through the backcountry, stealing cattle, mainly from Mexico or New Mexico ranches. They then sold them to supposedly legitimate ranchers for resale. Ranches owned by the McClory and Clanton families were reputedly headquarters for receiving stolen cattle. The Great Cattle Scam attracted little attention from Americans who were more interested in making money in new areas of rich mining than in international relations. Mexico had imposed high taxes on alcohol and tobacco. As a result, smugglers arrived in southern Arizona Territory to buy the goods at a bargain price for southbound resale. Bandits in America found an easy target in the cash and jewel-laden smugglers. The situation changed as the year 1881 passed. To stop outlawry against Mexican citizens, the Mexican government dropped taxation on alcohol and tobacco. John C. Fremont, the former Pathfinder, and first Republican presidential candidate suggested that the territorial legislature finance a militia to fight against outlaws and stop rustling. The visionary plan was rejected by the legislature. The Mexican government constructed a series of forts at the border to fight the American outlaws. In Mexico, American rustlers George Turner and Alfred McAllister were killed during a raid that took place on May 13. Citizens on the U.S. border began to get angry about outlaws, and what had happened on March 15. 3 robbers attempted to stop a stagecoach traveling from Tombstone to Benson. Driver Eli Bud Philpott and passenger Peter Roerig died in the attack. The robbers were identified as Harry Head, Jim Crane, and William Leonard. The militia plan of Fremont was abandoned, leaving little to stop the rustling and other criminal activities that ravaged the southern Arizona Territory. John Behan, Cochise County Sheriff, and his deputies were charged for fighting the rustlers. They became known as the Cowboys, but Behan was at best inefficient, and at worst crooked. His deputy Billy Breckenridge would recount how he assisted cowboy leader Curly Bill Brocious to collect taxes. Wells Fargo detective James Hume said that Virgil Earp, the U.S. deputy marshal, represented the federal government. Leslie Blackburn was in charge of most fieldwork, while Earp was backed by Wyatt Earp, his brother. Wyatt was left with the bulk of federal work because Virgil also served in the role of city marshal for Tombstone. Wyatt Earp wanted Behan's high-paying job as sheriff. The election was scheduled for the fall of 1882. Wyatt claims that he attempted to negotiate with Frank McClory, at Clanton, and the Clanton brothers, who were well known to the rustling crowd and the most visible, to inform him about the location of the stage robbers. This would increase Earp's chances of winning the election and Ike would ascertain the reward. 2 bartender brothers shot Leonard and rode to a remote New Mexico Territory mining community before the deal was completed. In retaliation, an army of cowboys tracked the brothers down and killed them. Commandant Felipe Neri sent troops to the border in August to stop another cattle raid in Mexico. They found a group of American soldiers huddled on the U.S. side at Guadalupe Canyon. The Mexicans crept a few feet across the border, killing 5, among them stage robber Jim Crane and Newman Clanton, scion of the Clanton clan, who left behind sons Ike, Finn, and Billy. Ike Clanton became increasingly concerned as he realized there was no deal for him. Wyatt Earp was aware that Ike had signed a deal with his cowboy friends, information which could have damaged Ike's standing within the rustling community. Outlawry against Americans became more common in the backcountry after the borders were closed. The Earps emerged as the most prominent law officers and took a strong stand against the criminal elements. They were resentful of the cowboys. Virgil Earp stated that the cowboys met at Charleston to take an oath over blood taken from John Ringo, their leader, and they promised to kill them. Ike Clanton arrived in Tombstone with emotion running stronger than any good saloon whiskey. He wanted to know if Wyatt Earp had leaked the secret. Earp claims that Ike told the secret to Doc Holliday, a heavy drinker, and dentist who has a funny sense of humor. Earp denied the accusations and sent Holliday to Tucson. Holliday met Clanton in the Occidental Saloon on October 25. According to the Earp account, Holliday was furious that Clanton had made false accusations against him. According to Ike, Holliday called him a damned liar who had threatened the Earps. He told me to pull out my gun and if there was any grit in me, to go to fighting. Clanton, who was unarmed, said that Holliday ordered him to retrieve his gun. Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan Earp seemed to end the fight. Wyatt took Holliday to Fly's room at Fly's lodging house. It was then that the most unlikely event of the day occurred. After retrieving his six-shooter from the store, Ike Clanton sat down with Tom McClory and John Behan to play poker. It was like Eisenhower selling pennies to Adolf Hitler. Around 7 a.m. the game was over, with Ike Clanton requesting that Virgil deliver a message to Holliday. "The damned son of a bitch has got to fight me," Ike supposedly said. Virgil said he responded, "Ike, I am an officer, and I don't want to hear you talking that way. I am going home now to go to bed, and I don't want you to raise any hell when I'm sleeping." "You won't carry a message?" Ike asked. Virgil said he would not. "You may have to fight before you know it," Ike said as Virgil walked away. Through the rest of the morning, Ike fueled his anger with whiskey, lurching from saloon to talk tough and make threats against the Earps. He said that as soon as the Earps and Doc Holliday showed themselves on the street that they would have to fight, said Ned Boyle, bartender at the Oriental Saloon, who went to awaken Wyatt and tell him of the threat. Deputy Marshal Andy Bronk also heard of the threats and woke Virgil. Injudiciously, both Wyatt and Virgil went back to sleep and ignored Ike's anger. Virgil and Morgan Earp spotted Ike with a six-shooter as well as a rifle around noon on the 26th. Virgil rammed his revolver into Ike's skull and then led the cowboy to Judge Albert O. Wallace. Wyatt Earp entered and said, "You damn dirty cow thief. You have been threatening our lives, and I know it. I think I would be justified in shooting you down any place I would meet you. But if you are anxious to make a fight, I will go anywhere on earth to damn fight you. Even over to San Simon among your crowd." Clanton replied, "Fight is my racket and all that I want is 4 feet ground. If you fellows were." A second later, Morgan Earp held up Ike's gun and taunted, saying that he would pay the fine for Ike fighting. Ike said he didn't like the odds and refused to pay the fine. Wallace issued a $25 fine to Ike for possessing firearms within the city limits. Wyatt was about to leave the courtroom when he met Tom McClory. They had an argument that resulted in Earp hitting the cowboy with his left and then beating him with a six-shooter. Frank McClory, Billy Clanton, and their horse stopped at the Grand Hotel Saloon. Billy Claiborne, a cowboy friend, told them about the beatings that were delivered to their brothers, and Frank dropped his whiskey glass without taking a sip. The town became more anxious as the afternoon progressed, and was filled with fear that there was a conflict. The Earps gathered at the corner of 4th and Allen in front of Hafford's Corner Saloon and watched as Ike Clanton and Frank McClory entered Spangenberg's gun shop. Frank and Billy bought ammunition, but the proprietor refused Ike a gun. The McClorys and Clantons split up and left the gun shop. While the McClorys went on to collect cattle that they had sold, Claiborne and Billy Clanton went back to retrieve Billy's horse. They would again meet at the OK Corral, where witnesses could overhear them making threats to the Earps. The Earps were approached by townsmen who offered their assistance and told them about the cowboy threats. Virgil Earp, the city marshal, said that he had asked Sheriff Behan for assistance in disarming cowboys. Behan instead offered to go and speak to the McClorys and Clantons to determine if he could peacefully disarm them all by himself. After Virgil waited almost 20 minutes for Behan's talk, John Fonk, a local businessman, came to inform the marshal of the cowboys' actions. Virgil stated he would not interfere if they were getting their horses and leaving town, but if they were armed and walking the streets he would have to arrest them. "Why?" Fonk responded, "They are all down on Fremont Street now." Virgil Earp looked to his brothers and Holliday. Holliday was given a short-barreled shotgun by Virgil Earp to hide under his long gray coat. Holliday gave his walking stick to the marshal. The four started the historic walk that would forever be a part of history. Behan, who was reportedly running up Fremont Street, shouted at them, "For God's sake, don't go down there or you will get yourself murdered." Virgil replied that he was going to disarm them. What the sheriff said next is uncertain. Behan would say that he told the Earps, "I was there for the purpose of arresting and disarming them." The Earps believed the sheriff said he had already disarmed them, and they then, apparently disregarding the warning that they would get murdered, made the mistake of relaxing a little. Wyatt Earp put his six-shooter back in his coat pocket. Virgil shifted his six-shooter off his hip into a more difficult position to draw and held the walking stick in his right hand. When they arrived at the 15-foot wide vacant lot on Fremont Street where the cowboys had congregated, the Earps were surprised to see that at least two of the opposition, Frank McClory and Billy Clanton, still carried revolvers, and rifles were visible on the horses. Virgil raised the walking stick and growled, "Throw up your hands, boys, I intend to disarm you." The shooting started quickly. After 2 shots and a pause, the gunfight broke out on various fronts. Holliday charged forward to chase Tom McClory. He was partially obscured by a horse and then shot a shotgun into McClory's chest. At about the same moment, Ike lurched forward to grab Wyatt Earp. Clanton said he heroically tried to push him out of the way. Earp said he told Ike, "The fight has commenced, get to fighting or get away." Ike, whose mouth had aroused the town and inflamed the Earps, then dashed from the scene. Frank McClory shot Virgil Earp right in the calf with his 6-shooter. Billy Clanton was then shot in the right wrist, and then Clanton was shot a second time in the chest by Morgan Earp. Earp switched guns, leaned against a wall, and shot him. Morgan fell and yelled, "I am hit." A bullet struck his shoulder blade and passed clean through. Morgan fell but got back up. He was probably tripping over a Fremont Street dirt mound as the town was installing new water pipes. Frank McClory, who was badly wounded, tried to cover himself with his horse as he ran into the street. He fired at Morgan, causing his horse to bolt. Unprotected and exhausted, Frank squatted in the street, but when Holliday pursued him, Frank stood, aimed, and said, "I've got you now. Blaze away." According to the Nugget, Holliday replied, "You're a daisy, if you have." McClory fired and grazed Holliday's sides. Holliday shouted, "I'm shot right through." Frank McClory stumbled further into the street, as Doc Morgan Earp fired and Morgan's shot crashed into McClory's right side, Holliday's into McClory's chest. McClory continued breathing as Holliday ran up to him shouting, "The son of a bitch had shot me, I mean to kill him." But it was too late. The fight had been shot out of Frank McClory. His brother Tom had made it to the corner of 3rd and Fremont, where he lay dying at the base of a telegraph pole. Frank died in the street. Tom and Billy were carried into a nearby house, where they would survive for only minutes. Wyatt Earp remained unaffected, despite Morgan and Virgil Earp being both injured. Wyatt Earp was approached by Bean, who said, "I will have to arrest you." A witness recalled Earp's reply, "I won't be arrested. You deceived me, Johnny, you told me they were not armed. I won't be arrested, but I am here to answer what I have done. I am not going to leave town." And Earp was not arrested, not then, at least. Almost immediately, Richard Rule, a journalist, and his colleagues began to race to gather the news. The stories were vivid, colorful, and tinged with blood. They did not quote many people, but instead made journalists' assessments of the material. By the epitaph report, the battle began when 2 cowboys pulled their guns and fired the first 2 shots. The Nugget had it different, saying Frank McClory made a motion for his gun, which prompted Wyatt Earp to quickly draw and shoot McClory. Both stories led to a belief that the law officers were in the right. The situation would dramatically change within 48 hours. The coroner's inquiry began and Sheriff Bean, Claiborne, Ike Clanton, and other cowboy friends testified to a very different start to the gunfight. They would say that the Earps fired the first few shots in the conflict. Clanton was charged with murder against the Earps. A preliminary hearing lasted for a month, at which each side would present their version of events. According to the cowboy version, it was self-defense. According to the Earps, it was murder. For the Bean/cowboy version of the first shots to be true, Doc Holliday would have had to orchestrate an incredible revolver-shotgun revolver shuffle. An officer of the court would have had to lie under oath or both. The Nugget and Epitaph would have had to have missed the biggest story of their existences. This incredible sequence of events is almost unbelievable. Please like, share, and subscribe. This helps us to reach new people and produce new videos for you to enjoy. Thanks for watching.